Few shows in television history captured hearts quite like The Golden Girls. 4 older women living together in Miami, sharing laughter, heartbreak, and cheesecake. It became a global phenomenon. But behind the laughter and one-liners, there was a side of the show fans never saw. In her final years, Rue McClanahan, who famously played the flirtatious and fiery Blanche Devereaux, broke her silence and shared the shocking truth about what really went on behind the scenes. For years, the public believed the 4 leading ladies, Rue, Bea Arthur, Betty White, and Estelle Getty, were as close in real life as their characters were on screen. But according to Rue, that wasn't the full story. She revealed that tension ran deep, especially between Bea Arthur and Betty White. What appeared to be witty banter on screen sometimes masked real-life resentment. Rue described moments of silence on set that felt colder than a Miami night, and rehearsals where smiles vanished the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Still, Rue insisted there was also deep respect, even love, buried beneath the differences. "We didn't have to be best friends," she once said. "We just had to be professionals. And in that, we were family." Before her passing, Rue confessed that The Golden Girls changed her life but also took a toll on her emotionally. The fame, the expectations, and the rumors all weighed heavily, yet she remained proud of the show's legacy. She wanted fans to know that despite the drama, the laughter was real, the chemistry was undeniable, and the magic they created was something none of them could ever recreate again. Before she became television's ultimate Southern belle, Rue McClanahan was a young woman from Oklahoma with big dreams and no guarantees. Born in Healdton in 1934, Rue grew up far from the glamour of Hollywood. Her childhood was ordinary, small-town America at its core, but her imagination was boundless. She was the kind of girl who could turn a backyard fence into a theater stage and a few friends into her audience. After college, Rue's heart led her straight to New York City, where she began performing in off-Broadway productions. She struggled at first, living in tiny apartments and working side jobs to pay rent. But Rue had something special, that rare mix of confidence and vulnerability that drew people in. Her Southern charm and quick wit stood out in every audition. Slowly but surely, she started landing roles in television dramas and sitcoms throughout the 1960s and 70s. Her big break came when she was cast in Maude alongside Bea Arthur, years before the Golden Girls would bring them together again. On Maude, Rue played Vivian Harmon, a lively, flirtatious woman who became an early version of the character she would later perfect as Blanche Devereaux. Working with Bea was both inspiring and intimidating. Bea was serious, disciplined, and commanding, while Rue was spontaneous and light-hearted. The two respected each other's talent, but their personalities often clashed quietly behind the scenes. When The Golden Girls was being cast in 1985, Rue initially auditioned for the role of Rose Nyland, while Betty White read for Blanche. But the producers quickly realized they'd gotten it backward. Rue's natural sass, her flirtatious delivery, and that unmistakable Southern lilt made her born to play Blanche. The switch changed television history forever. As Blanche Devereaux, Rue became a cultural icon. She redefined how women over 50 could be portrayed on screen, confident, funny, and unapologetically sexy. She wasn't a side character or comic relief. She was a leading woman who owned her story. Audiences loved Blanche's boldness, but Rue often said she saw the character as misunderstood. Blanche wasn't shallow, Rue once explained. She was a woman who believed in love and refused to give up on it, no matter her age. Behind the spotlight, however, Rue's personal life wasn't as glamorous.
She went through 5 marriages, each one leaving behind lessons in love, heartbreak, and resilience.
Acting had given her fame, but not always stability. The pressure to stay youthful and beautiful in Hollywood weighed on her. She joked about her love life often, but there was a quiet sadness in how much she yearned for lasting companionship. Still, Rue poured her heart into every role, especially The Golden Girls. She spent long hours perfecting Blanche's charm, her drawl, her gestures, even the way she said, "darling." Her co-stars admired her dedication. But tensions began to rise as the show grew more successful. Rue later admitted that she often felt caught between Bea Arthur's stern professionalism and Betty White's cheerful optimism. The energy on set was unpredictable. Laughter one day, distance the next. Yet, despite the behind-the-scenes friction, Rue believed The Golden Girls was something sacred. It gave women a voice, celebrated aging with humor, and showed friendship in all its messy, imperfect beauty. It was a show about 4 women who found family in each other, even if real life didn't always mirror the script. For Rue, Blanche Devereaux wasn't just a role, she was liberation. A character who let her embrace her femininity, flaws, and humor all at once. Decades later, fans still remember Blanche's sharp one-liners, dazzling outfits, and unstoppable spirit, all of which came straight from Rue's heart. Behind the laughter and charm that made The Golden Girls one of the most beloved sitcoms in TV history, there was a quiet tension simmering among the cast, particularly between Rue McClanahan, Bea Arthur, and Betty White. While fans saw 4 women who adored one another on screen, reality was far more complicated. Rue often described the atmosphere on set as professional, but not always friendly. She deeply admired Bea Arthur's commanding presence and timing, but was often intimidated by her seriousness. Bea came from the stage, disciplined, methodical, and protective of her craft. Rue, on the other hand, was more spontaneous. She brought warmth and humor to every scene, often improvising little touches that made Blanche Devereaux unforgettable. That free-spirited energy sometimes clashed with Bea's strict routine. The biggest surprise, however, came from Betty White. Audiences adored Betty for her sunny personality.
But Rue later revealed that not everyone on the cast found her charm easy to handle.
In Rue's words, Betty was always cheerful, sometimes too cheerful. Bea, in particular, couldn't stand what she considered Betty's constant sweetness. The contrast in personalities, Bea's stoic focus, Rue's playful nature, Betty's perpetual perkiness, and Estelle Getty's quiet insecurity, created a dynamic that was both magical and volatile. Despite the tension, Rue made a conscious effort to keep the peace. She loved her co-stars deeply, even if they didn't always show affection openly. She once said, "I never saw any of them as rivals. Only as women I respected. But the pressure of fame and the relentless shooting schedule made maintaining that peace increasingly difficult. The feud between Bea and Betty became so well known, the tabloids often exaggerated it. But Rue confirmed in her memoir, My First 5 Husbands, and the Ones Who Got Away, that there was truth behind the rumors. They weren't close, she admitted. There were times when Bea would walk off set after a scene and not say a word to anyone. Rue often found herself in the middle, trying to lighten the mood with humor. What made it all the more painful was that, despite any personal friction, the 4 women shared something historic. They were redefining television. At a time when most shows focused on young stars, The Golden Girls proved that women in their 50s and 60s could carry a prime-time comedy, and do it better than anyone else. They were winning Emmys, topping ratings, and capturing hearts across generations. Rue often reflected that Bea's gruffness wasn't cruelty, it was armor. Bea wasn't mean, Rue once explained in an interview. She was guarded. She'd been through a lot and didn't trust easily. Still, the emotional distance wore on everyone. The cast loved one another in their own complicated way, but the tension never fully disappeared. Even as the show reached its peak, Rue noticed how fame began to isolate them all. They were together almost every day, yet often retreated to their own dressing rooms in silence once the cameras stopped rolling. Rue missed the camaraderie they once had during the early seasons, when they'd laugh between takes, share stories, and sneak pieces of cheesecake from the set kitchen. When The Golden Girls ended in 1992, Rue cried. Despite everything, the show had been her family. She later confessed that saying goodbye to Blanche Devereaux was harder than she expected. It wasn't just a role, she said. It was a part of me. Still, as the years passed, Rue found herself looking back with gratitude rather than regret. Whatever the tension, she believed The Golden Girls had changed television forever, and changed her life most of all. We may have bickered, she once laughed, but together we made something beautiful. While The Golden Girls made Rue McClanahan a household name, fame didn't protect her from pain. Beneath the laughter, witty one-liners, and glamorous charm of Blanche Devereaux, Rue was fighting quiet personal battles that few ever saw. Her life off-screen was filled with heartbreak, health scares, and a search for love that never seemed to last. Rue had been married 6 times, and though she joked about it in interviews, saying she never gave up on love, those relationships carried deep wounds. "I wasn't afraid of marriage," she once said. "I was afraid of being alone." Each union began with hope and ended with heartbreak.
Her marriages ranged from creative artists to businessmen, yet she often felt misunderstood.
Fame made it harder, not easier, to find genuine companionship. Many men loved the idea of Blanche Devereaux, not the woman who played her. She admitted in her memoir that the line between her character and her real self began to blur. Blanche was confident, sexy, fearless, Rue reflected. I was often the opposite, uncertain, too trusting, too eager to make things work. Fans adored Blanche's flirtatious energy, but Rue's romantic life behind the scenes was a series of emotional highs and devastating lows. Her struggles didn't end with love. During the later years of the Golden Girls, Rue began facing serious health issues. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, a terrifying reality that she kept mostly private. At a time when she was expected to be radiant and funny on screen, she was undergoing treatment and battling exhaustion. She continued to work without complaint, hiding her pain behind her radiant smile. "The laughter," she said, "was my medicine." When the show ended, Rue tried to rebuild her personal life. She continued acting, taking stage roles and occasional TV appearances, but the absence of her Golden Girls family left a hole in her heart. She stayed in touch with Betty White and Estelle Getty, but rarely saw Bea Arthur after the finale. "Bea and I were different creatures," Rue admitted gently. "We didn't need to see each other to respect what we shared." As time passed, Rue began to reflect deeply on her choices. In candid interviews, she spoke about her desire to live authentically, to stop chasing perfection and embrace who she truly was. "People think because you're on TV you have everything," she once said. "But sometimes you give pieces of yourself away until there's not much left." One of Rue's most painful moments came in the late 2000s when she suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. For someone whose life had been built around charm, wit, and storytelling, it was devastating. Yet even then, Rue's resilience shone through. She slowly relearned how to walk and speak, fighting to regain her independence. "I wasn't ready to quit," she said during her recovery. "I still had love to give." Her later years were quieter. Rue lived with her cats, tended to her garden, and stayed active in local theater when she could. Friends described her as a woman of endless humor and kindness, but one who carried a certain loneliness. "She had this glow," one friend said, "but also a sadness that never fully went away." Through it all, Rue remained proud of the Golden Girls. She called it the best work of my life and never stopped being grateful for the fans who adored her. Even when her health declined, she continued answering fan letters, often writing long, heartfelt replies in her own hand. "They gave me love when I needed it most," she said softly. Behind the laughter, Rue McClanahan's story was one of courage, a woman who faced heartbreak, illness, and loss, but refused to lose her spirit. "I've had joy, pain, and everything in between," she once said, "and I wouldn't trade any of it, because it made me who I am." By the late 2000s, Rue McClanahan's once dazzling energy had dimmed, but only slightly. Even as age and illness crept in, her wit remained razor-sharp, and her warmth as radiant as ever. Yet behind that playful humor was a woman preparing herself for what she called the next great adventure. Rue's final years were a delicate balance between gratitude and quiet struggle, a period when she reflected deeply on her life, her regrets, and the love she had given to the world. In 2009, Rue suffered a massive stroke following heart bypass surgery. It was a devastating blow to her already fragile health. She had been through cancer, multiple surgeries, and years of recovery, but this time her body was tired. Close friends said that even in the hospital she never lost her charm. She'd joke with nurses, compliment strangers, and ask about everyone else before herself. "She was the kindest person," one nurse later said. "Even when she was in pain, she made everyone around her laugh." Those final months were spent surrounded by love. Family members, friends, and a few of her former Golden Girls co-stars visited her quietly, away from the public eye. Betty White, who had shared years of laughter with Rue, was heartbroken when she learned of her declining health. "Rue had a light," Betty said. "You could feel it the moment she entered a room." Rue passed away peacefully on June 3, 2010, at the age of 76. The news struck fans like a thunderclap. Millions who had grown up watching the Golden Girls felt as if they had lost someone they knew personally. The world mourned the woman who brought Blanche Devereaux to life, the Southern belle with the sharp tongue and the heart full of dreams. But Rue's legacy went far beyond her role on television. She was a proud advocate for animal rights, women's independence, and AIDS awareness, long before it was fashionable for Hollywood stars to champion such causes. She used her fame to promote compassion, kindness, and equality. Her activism reflected who she truly was, not just a performer, but a deeply empathetic human being. In interviews after her passing, co-stars and friends described Rue as the heart of the Golden Girls, while B. Arthur brought depth and strength, and Betty White radiated warmth and charm. Rue added sensuality and mischief, a spark that made the show unforgettable. Her portrayal of Blanche was bold and unapologetic, challenging stereotypes of aging women in television. She showed the world that confidence and desire didn't fade with age, they evolved. Over time, fans came to see Rue not just as a character, but as an inspiration. Many older women credited her for helping them embrace beauty and femininity at any age. "She made us feel seen," one fan wrote after her death. "She showed us that getting older doesn't mean giving up who you are." Even now, decades after her passing, Rue McClanahan's laughter still echoes through living rooms across the world. Reruns of The Golden Girls continue to bring comfort, reminding audiences that friendship, humor, and courage never go out of style. And every time Blanche delivers a sassy one-liner or breaks into that dazzling smile, fans remember the woman behind it, one who lived fiercely, loved deeply, and left the world brighter than she found it. Before her death, Rue reportedly said to a close friend, "If people remember me with a smile, that's all I want." And that's exactly what happened. Rue McClanahan may be gone, but her spirit, the laughter, the glamour, and the honesty she brought to life, remains timeless. Through Blanche, she became immortal, and in the hearts of fans everywhere, she'll always be the Golden Girl who never lost her sparkle.